The training hall in Tel Aviv fell into an unusual silence. It was March 2019, and one of Israel's top combat facilities was hosting an international close-quarters combat symposium. Experts from across the globe had gathered, military instructors, special forces trainers, and martial arts masters, each representing their nation's most effective fighting systems. Among them stood Avi Gold, a highly respected Krav Maga instructor known for his no-nonsense approach. At 42, he had spent decades refining a system built on one principle: real-world effectiveness. His training methods were used by elite units, and his reputation was grounded in practicality, not performance. When the Filipino delegation stepped forward, Avi leaned back with visible doubt. Representing them was Carlos Mendez, a calm and composed martial artist carrying traditional training weapons, sticks and blades rooted in centuries-old Filipino combat systems. Carlos began explaining his method, how weapon flow, angles, and timing worked together. But before he could go far, Avi interrupted. "With respect," Avi said firmly, "we're here to discuss systems that work in real combat. What you're showing, these patterns, these movements, they look impressive, but against a real threat, they won't hold. It feels more like performance than survival." The room grew tense. Some nodded in agreement. Others waited. Avi continued. "Krav Maga works because it's direct. No unnecessary motion. You strike, disable, and survive. These traditional systems come from a different time. Modern threats need modern solutions." Carlos listened quietly, his expression steady. Then he responded calmly, "I understand your perspective, but sometimes what looks complex is simply misunderstood." He paused before adding, "Instead of debating, why don't we demonstrate?" The room fell silent again. "Not a fight," Carlos clarified, "but a controlled test. We apply our systems against the same scenarios. Let results speak." A slight smile appeared on Avi's face. "Fair enough," he said. "But when this proves otherwise, I hope you'll accept the reality." The organizers quickly agreed. What began as a discussion had now turned into something much bigger, a clash of philosophies. 6 months later, the demonstration was scheduled in Singapore at a neutral training facility. Word had spread far beyond expectations. Over 300 professionals attended, military trainers, security experts, and martial artists from dozens of countries. Cameras were set up across the arena, broadcasting the event worldwide. Avi arrived confident, having spent months refining his techniques and studying his opponent's style. He believed the fluid movements he had seen would create openings, opportunities for his direct, aggressive approach. Carlos arrived quietly with minimal gear. Beside him stood his mentor, an elderly master whose scarred arms told stories of real encounters, not practice drills. There was no showmanship, just calm preparation. The first scenario began: defense against a single knife attack. A trained attacker launched a fast, direct strike. Avi stepped forward immediately. His response was explosive. Block, counterstrike, control the arm and disarm. It was powerful, fast, and decisive. The audience responded with approval. Then it was Carlos's turn. The same attack came, but instead of charging forward, Carlos shifted slightly, just a small angle. His movement looked almost effortless. In one smooth motion, he redirected the attack, controlled the wrist, and stepped to a safer position. His training blade touched key targets in rapid succession. The entire exchange ended faster than expected. The room grew quiet. More attacks followed, different angles, speeds, and grips. Avi's approach remained consistent, strong, aggressive, and effective. He met force with force and controlled the situation through power. Carlos, however, moved differently. His techniques seemed subtle but precise. Instead of stopping attacks directly, he guided them away, using positioning and timing. Each movement served multiple purposes: defense, control, and counter, all at once. What seemed complex at first began to reveal a deeper logic. By the third scenario, multiple attackers, the contrast became clearer. Avi responded with determination, focusing on neutralizing one opponent quickly before turning to the next. His method worked, but it required absorbing risk and committing fully to each exchange. Carlos approached it differently. Instead of engaging both attackers head-on, he moved in a way that kept one opponent between himself and the other. His positioning forced hesitation. Neither attacker could fully commit without exposing themselves. Within moments, both threats were controlled. The observers leaned forward. What they were seeing wasn't just technique, it was strategy in motion. The last scenario tested both men in a confined space, a narrow corridor designed to simulate real-world environments like hallways or stairwells. This setting was expected to favor Avi's approach. Limited space meant less movement, more direct engagement. Exactly what his system was built for. When his turn came, Avi delivered a sharp and decisive response. He moved forward aggressively, controlled the attacker, and finished the sequence with authority. It was effective, but the judges noted that such close exchanges could result in injury in real situations. Then Carlos stepped into the corridor. The expectation was that his movement-based style would struggle in tight spaces. Instead, the opposite happened. Carlos adapted instantly. His movements became even smaller, more efficient. Every slight shift created an advantage. The confined space didn't restrict him. It amplified his precision. He used angles so subtly that they were almost invisible. The attacker's strikes seemed to miss by inches, while Carlos maintained control throughout. His technique required less force, yet achieved the same result without exposing himself. When the final scores were announced, both systems were recognized as effective, but in terms of efficiency, control, and adaptability, Carlos's approach stood out. The room remained silent for a moment. Then Avi walked forward. All eyes followed him. He stopped in front of Carlos and extended his hand. "I was wrong," Avi said openly. "I judged something I didn't fully understand." Carlos accepted the handshake with respect. Avi continued, addressing everyone present. "My system works, it's been proven. But today showed me something important. Effectiveness isn't just about power or speed. It can also come from precision, timing, and understanding at a deeper level." He paused before adding, "What I saw wasn't performance. It was refined knowledge." The audience responded with applause. Carlos simply nodded. "Different paths," he said. "Same goal, survival." That day became more than just a demonstration. It became a reminder. True mastery isn't about proving others wrong. It's about staying open enough to recognize when there's more to learn. Sometimes what looks simple is powerful, and sometimes what looks complex is simply misunderstood. The event didn't end when the applause stopped. Clips from the demonstration began circulating online. Within days, millions had watched it. Not because one fighter won, but because something rare had happened. Ego had stepped aside, and learning had taken its place. Training centers across the world started discussing what they had seen. Some focused on the contrast, power versus precision. Others focused on the lesson, never underestimate what you don't understand. A few months later, something even more surprising happened. Avi traveled to the Philippines. There were no cameras this time, no audience, no competition, just training. Under the guidance of Carlos and his elderly mentor, Avi stepped back into the role of a student. For the first time in years, he wasn't teaching, he was learning. He struggled at first. The movements felt unfamiliar. The timing was different. The approach challenged everything he had built over decades. But slowly, things began to change. He started seeing patterns, angles he had never noticed before, moments where force wasn't needed, opportunities where control replaced collision. What once looked complex now felt logical, and what once seemed unnecessary now revealed its purpose. Weeks later, when Avi returned home, his students noticed something different. His techniques were still sharp, his mindset still direct, but there was a new layer: calmness, adaptability, awareness. He no longer rushed into every situation. He understood it first, and then acted. In one of his sessions, a student asked, "What changed?" Avi paused for a moment and replied, "I used to think fighting was about ending the threat as fast as possible." He looked around the room. "Now I realize it's about understanding the threat so deeply that you don't have to fight harder, just smarter." Carlos, on the other hand, returned to his small training space. Nothing changed for him on the outside. Same place, same methods, same quiet discipline. But now people from different countries began showing up. Soldiers, trainers, fighters, all wanting to understand what they had witnessed. Carlos taught them the same way his family had taught him. No shortcuts, no show, just principles. "Every movement has a reason," he would say. "If you don't understand the reason, you're just copying, not learning." This story isn't about which system is better. It's about perspective, about growth, about humility. Because the biggest mistake people make, whether in combat, business, or life, is this: they assume what they know is enough. But real growth begins the moment you accept that it's not. Sometimes strength wins. Sometimes speed wins. But the highest level, that belongs to understanding. Never reject something just because it looks different. Never underestimate something just because you don't understand it. And never let your ego become the limit of your growth. Because the moment you say, "I already know everything," that's the moment you stop learning. And in any field, the one who keeps learning always wins.